Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sarah Cott, SVP of Programming at The Hill. Thank you to everyone joining us online and in the room for our event, Science Over Stigma, Rethinking Nicotine Harm Reduction. I'd like to thank our sponsors, PMI US, for their support of this discussion. Despite decades of progress in tobacco control, nicotine and how it's consumed by adults still remains a question mark for many. What are the risks? Do they change based on how nicotine is delivered? Are smoke-free nicotine products better alternatives to continued smoking? Here in Washington, the question sounds more like this. Should the FDA modernize its role in regulating tobacco products? How can we better protect public health, especially for our youth and vulnerable communities? This morning, we'll try to answer all of these questions and more as we go over results of the latest U.S. Medical Professionals Survey and hear from lawmakers, public health experts, and consumer advocates on misperceptions, opportunities, and challenges of smoke-free products and what it will take to accelerate an end to smoking in America. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping rules. If you're here with us in the room, please put your phones on silent for the duration of the program, but please join the conversation on social media. You can follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram at The Hill Events using the hashtag HillHealth.
Now, please welcome to the stage for this morning's sponsor segment, Pratika Kumar, Director at Philip Morris International, in conversation with Liz Martin, Account Executive at The Hill.
Welcome, Dr. Kumar. So glad to be with you today. I understand you're here to share top-line findings of a national survey with U.S. medical professionals. Can you please take us through the findings?
Yes, I'm happy to. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Pratika Kumar. I'm the Director of the U.S. Scientific Engagement Group at Philip Morris International, and I'm really pleased to share the top-line findings from a recent national survey of U.S. medical professionals. I was so excited that I woke up 3 times last night to check if it was 6 a.m. yet. So great. So this research really explores clinicians' understanding of tobacco and nicotine products. What are their risk perceptions of these products and how that translates into patient care? Now, these insights help us better understand the opportunities and barriers on the road to effective tobacco harm reduction. And by clinicians, I'm going to use medical professionals, clinicians, all interchangeably. And what I mean is physicians, nurses, social workers, people who work in direct patient care. So let me tell you a little bit about the study. If the clicker will work. Right? So this was really a comprehensive study. It was fielded and conducted by Pavado. It's a research firm based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And we went through an independent institutional review board approval for this study. And what it really does is it provides, makes sure that the respondents' privacy, integrity, data credibility, all of those things are maintained, and that we can publish the findings in a scientific journal. So if you see, we surveyed 1,565 healthcare professionals, and it was through a broad range of specialties, right from primary care physicians to general nurses, mental health nurses, pulmonologists, cardiologists, oncologists, but then we also wanted to broaden it and include mental health professionals. So we included psychiatrists, mental health nurses, and licensed clinical social workers who work in the space of addiction. And that is because smoking over-indexes in populations with mental illness. So just want to make sure that I have everything here. And yes, I did want to share this, that about 4 years ago, Rutgers published a similar study where they looked at the perceptions of physicians of tobacco nicotine products. Now, that sample was a smaller sample, and it only covered about 6 specialties. So we are happy that we were able to get a larger sample and bring in more diversity of voices in this study. Now, when physicians were asked about public health issues that the U.S. government should take action on, smoking and tobacco use really ranked very high, right after chronic diseases and mental health. So one thing I want to make sure that I share here is that smoking is not just a standalone risk. It is also a driver of many chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and cancer. Now, About 80%, and that explains why 80% of the healthcare professionals in this study said that addressing smoking and tobacco use should be a high priority for government action. So the message is clear that they want smoking and tobacco use to be front and center for the US government to take action on. And this is where I will, yes. I'm going to stand, and you can find out that I'm a recovering academic because, so this is where I said that, it is smoking and tobacco use should be a priority for the US government. I'm sorry, I forgot to hit the clicker. And this is where I want to show you that medical professionals, so the good news coming out of the study is that medical professionals do see a continuum of risk. So they consistently placed combusted cigarettes on the most harmful end of the spectrum, and they placed nicotine replacement therapies at the least harmful end of the spectrum. But what we really see is that while they did that, FDA, I should back up and say that FDA places all nicotine and tobacco products on a continuum of risk. So going from combustion, which is the most harmful, to no combustion, which is the least harmful. And if you see, this is the risk that comes from cigarettes, right here. And so what you see is that when one switches from use of combustible products to non-combustible products, that risk really drops. So it's no longer a straight line. It's not a continuum, it's a risk cliff, right? And this is where the gap is in the knowledge of professionals, because what we saw in the study, while they rated cigarettes as 9.7 on a 10-point scale, they rated heated tobacco products as an 8, which is not that much different, right? And so what we see is that there is a gap in their knowledge of knowing that there is a significant risk in non-combustible products. Now, this is the education gap that we must address so that physicians and nurses and healthcare professionals can address the needs of adults who smoke. Now, a deeper issue of confusion among healthcare professionals is how they see nicotine. Right? And so about 2/3 of the healthcare professionals in our study, they either incorrectly believe that nicotine on its own is a carcinogen, it causes cancer, or they're unsure. Now, this understanding presents a major barrier to harm reduction. And if providers are uncertain about nicotine's role in disease, it becomes nearly impossible for them to confidently counsel patients. So what we need to recognize here is that providers, who are the most trusted voices for patients, if they carry this misperception, how can we expect the public to have the right information? It was too fast. I was only given 8 minutes, so I'm going to show you the top line findings. Yes. So this really talks about what happens in practice. We saw that there is nicotine misperception. We saw that while there is an intellectual understanding of risk continuum, there is some confusion about where to place those products on that risk continuum. And that translates into practice because only 21% of the providers in the study said that they always talk about smoke-free products with the patients who smoke. So most of the providers are only sometimes having that conversation with their patients. So, and there was a slight increase among providers who see a higher volume of patients who smoke, but that was not a dramatic increase in any way. So this gap really shows that what providers know and what providers do, there are real-world consequences, right? So 93% of the providers said that if FDA deems a product as reduced risk, it has an obligation to share that information with the providers. And 95% of the providers said that if FDA shares that information with them, they are happy to share that with their patients. So they are looking to FDA for very clear, consistent concrete guidelines and through the formats that they prefer, right? So physicians work within very tight timelines, they have very limited bandwidth. As somebody who worked in a healthcare system myself, and I did this study on opioids in the health system, physicians don't really have the time to have the conversation unless they are given very clear and concrete guidelines. And then lastly, and I feel most importantly, physicians think that FDA needs a reform. They feel that the current framework is outdated and it needs to evolve to better regulate modern nicotine products. Now, this is important. Why? Because many of the smoke-free products that we were talking about earlier today on the risk continuum, they were not even on the market when FDA started regulating tobacco products in 2009. So the science has evolved, but the provider education, the public understanding, and the regulation all have lagged. So in the end, I feel that there are 5 truths that come out of this work, and I want to leave you with that. One is that uncertainty serves no one. It doesn't serve the providers, doesn't serve the public, and it certainly doesn't serve the 30 million adults who smoke in this country. Secondly, if clinicians don't get the message right, the public won't. Thirdly, that public health needs to evolve beyond this all or nothing or one-size-fits-all approach. Risk is not binary. It's not risky, risky or not risky. Risk exists on a continuum. And finally, if we really want to save lives, we have to expand the toolbox and support the providers in guiding patients to safer choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar, very much for sharing this with us, and we look forward to the rest of the program.
Thank you.